It all began on a particularly cold night, February 1, 1922, at a luxurious bungalow located at 404B South Alvarado Street in Los Angeles. This was the kind of place where enthusiastic fans often gathered, hoping to catch a glimpse of a movie star. If anyone had braved the chill that night, they would have seen not just a star, but the start of a major Hollywood scandal. At around 7:00 p.m., actor and director William Desmond Taylor welcomed his friend Mabel Normand, who arrived in a lavish chauffeur-driven limousine. She would make a brief visit to Taylor's home and then leave, unaware that she would be one of the last people to see him alive. William Desmond Taylor is a notable figure in Hollywood history, not for his films, but for his shocking, unsolved murder. The case captivated the nation and remains a mystery today. Suspects included well-known personalities like Mabel Normand, actress Mary Miles Minter, and Minter's mother. Sometimes, a person's death reveals their true identity, and this was certainly true for William Desmond Taylor. Just days after his murder, the investigation took an unexpected turn. Police discovered that the man known as William Desmond Taylor was actually William Cunningham Dean Tanner, born on April 26, 1872, in Carlow, Ireland. Like many who were drawn to early Hollywood, he had adopted a new identity and left his previous life behind. Taylor was already a mystery before that tragic day. William was the third of 5 siblings in a distinguished family. His father, Major Thomas Kearns's Dean Tanner, served with the Carlow Rifles in the British Army, while his mother, Jane O'Brien, came from a wealthy Anglo-Irish family, part of Ireland's ruling elite. The family also owned property in Dublin, where William spent much of his early childhood. In his teenage years, William attempted to follow his father into the army, but failed the entrance exams. From 1885 to 1887, he attended Marlborough College in England, although some records suggest he may have gone to Clifton College instead. Regardless, he studied at one of England's top schools, where he first became interested in acting. His father, likely disapproving of this passion, sent William to live on a ranch near Runnymede, Kansas, in 1891. This seemed far removed from the London stage and should have discouraged his ambitions of becoming a new Oscar Wilde. However, the opposite happened. While in the U.S., Taylor became even more committed to acting and soon left the ranch to pursue success on Broadway in New York. On December 7, 1901, William married Ethel May Hamilton at a nearby church. Ethel May, known on stage as Ethel May Harrison, was an actress celebrated for her role in the popular Edwardian musical comedy Florodora. This marriage elevated William's social status, and the couple began dealing in antiques, which likely allowed him to further hone his acting skills. William became the vice president of an antique shop in New York, a successful business owned by his father-in-law. This role allowed him and his wife to enjoy a comfortable and stylish lifestyle. William was well-liked and popular among his peers. Their daughter, Ethel Daisy, was born in 1903. Although he seemed to have a promising life within New York's high society, William was struggling internally. The idea of a stable life in antiques seemed to trouble him, and he felt a strong urge to abandon his comfortable existence in search of adventure. Signs of his discontent were evident. As a member of several gentlemen's clubs, William often indulged in heavy drinking. He also battled depression and had several casual affairs. His mental health raised concerns among family and friends, and he experienced episodes of short-term amnesia. Altogether, this painted a picture of a deeply unhappy man. In 1908, William vanished from his life in New York. One day, he left for lunch and never returned. The next day, he sent a telegram to the antique shop asking for $600, which was delivered to him. After that, he completely disappeared from New York, and no one heard from him for many years. What happened to him afterward is unclear. He likely adopted the name William Desmond Taylor and traveled to Canada, Alaska, Colorado, and Montana during the gold rush. He used his engineering background to work in mining, but little is known about his life during this time, except that he also pursued acting by performing with various theater groups. After 4 years without contact, Ethel filed for divorce in 1912 so she could remarry. The divorce records listed his whereabouts as unknown, but later that year, William resurfaced at Unville, a busy movie-set village near Santa Monica, created by film pioneer Thomas H. Ince, who would later become embroiled in his own scandal. William arrived at Unville through connections with actors from New York whom he met in San Francisco. They encouraged him to join the burgeoning film industry in Los Angeles, and even provided him with funds for the move, suggesting his gold rush ventures had not been financially successful. However, it was the rise of the film industry, the silver screen rush, that would ultimately bring him success. After impressing at Unville, he was hired by the New York Motion Picture Company, a major player that operated multiple brands, including Kessel and Bauman, and contributed to the foundation of Paramount Studios. His first role with them was in a film called The Counterfeiter, although little information is available about it. Soon after, in 1913, he appeared in KB Studios' production of CL. During breaks on set, Taylor immersed himself in learning about the filmmaking process or reading. His commitment was evident. He rarely engaged in idle chatter and was a well-educated man dedicated to self-improvement. He acted in several films for Vitagraph Studios, including 4 with actress Margaret Gibson, and continued his work with the Balboa Amusement Producing Company. Neva Gerber, an actress he was engaged to until 1919, later described him as the soul of honor, a man of personal culture, education, and refinement. "I have never known a finer or better man." In 1914, Taylor began his directing career with the film The Judge's Wife for Balboa. He later directed 2 films for Favorite Players Film Co., before joining the American Film Manufacturing Company, where he directed much of the 30-episode serial The Diamond from the Sky. However, his career took off not as a director, but when he starred in the title role of Captain Alvarez, directed by Rollin S. Sturgeon and featuring Edith Story as the leading lady. The film was a major success, catapulting Taylor to fame and significantly increasing his earnings. Interestingly, the movie follows the story of Robert Way Rye, who travels to Argentina to manage his father's business. Unfortunately, the country is undergoing a revolution, prompting Way Rye to assume the identity of Captain Alvarez and become a heroic rebel leader. Taylor received widespread acclaim for his performance, which may have been influenced by his own life experiences. However, the film's success would later bring complications for Taylor. Around 1915, Taylor reconnected with his sister-in-law, Ada Brennan Dean Tanner, who was married to his younger brother Dennis. Dennis, a former British Army lieutenant, had disappeared in 1912, leaving Ada Brennan and their children behind. Ada Brennan was now living in Monrovia, California, where she sought treatment for tuberculosis at Pottinger Sanatorium, overseen by her sister's husband, Dr. John L. Pomeroy. This family connection would gain media attention after Taylor's murder, leading to a media frenzy in Monrovia. Taylor maintained a steady presence in Hollywood through both acting and directing. In 1917, he was cast in A Tale of Two Cities, where his background in art and literature greatly assisted director Frank Lloyd. He quickly earned a reputation as a skilled director, rising to a prominent position at Famous Players Lasky. He directed major stars of the era, including Dustin Farnham, George B. Sweeney, Kathleen Williams, and Constance Talmadge, overseeing significant projects like 1917's Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. By 1920, Taylor's fame was on the rise, along with his popularity among women. His looks and success allowed him to support many aspiring actresses. However, the onset of World War I disrupted Hollywood and life in general. In July 1918, at the age of 46, Taylor enlisted in the Canadian Army, though he wasn't deployed before the war concluded. He served with the peacekeeping force in France until his discharge in mid-1919. Notably, his early co-star Edith Story went directly to the front lines and became one of the first American women to drive ambulances in France and Belgium, taking on a dangerous yet commendable role. After returning, Taylor directed Anne of Green Gables in 1919, which starred his mentee, Mary Miles Minter. Her name would soon be associated with a dark and intricate mystery that emerged a few years later. Meanwhile, in New York, his ex-wife Ethel took their daughter, Ethel Daisy, to see a film that had gained acclaim in Hollywood called Captain Alvarez. This happened a decade before popcorn became a movie snack, but if Ethel had popcorn, she would have dropped it in shock when she saw her ex-husband on screen, now a major Hollywood star. She turned to Ethel Daisy and said, "That's your father." After returning home, Ethel Daisy wrote a letter to her father through the studio, leading him to visit her in New York. In 1921, he legally named Ethel Daisy as his heir, and they worked on rebuilding their relationship, forming a close bond. One of Taylor's last projects was directing Betty Compson in the 1922 film The Green Temptation, but he did not live to see it premiere, and the film is now considered lost. Now, let's revisit the unclear events of February 1, 1922, when Taylor received a visit from his friend, actress Mabel Normand. Taylor and Normand had known each other since 1920 and grew close during a challenging time in her life. They shared a love for literature, and Taylor provided stability for Normand as she struggled with drug addiction and excessive partying. He encouraged her to seek help at a sanatorium. Normand, deeply affected by the recent death of actress Olive Thomas, feared for her own life. Taylor's support during that autumn was likely life-saving for her. That evening, on a Wednesday, and with early commitments the next morning, they intended to keep the night short. The friends enjoyed orange blossom gin cocktails, played some piano, and discussed topics they loved, such as movies and the writings of Friedrich Nietzsche and Sigmund Freud. Taylor had promised Mabel a book, which she picked up before leaving. He also shared that morning's news. He had to bail his valet, Henry Peavy, out of jail after Peavy was arrested for lewd conduct in a public park the previous night. Around 7:45 p.m., Mabel said her goodbyes and Taylor walked her to her waiting car. As she got into her limousine, he likely didn't lock or even close the front door of his bungalow. They exchanged blown kisses as her car left, and Taylor returned inside. Mabel Normand was the last person to see William Desmond Taylor alive, just before 8:00 p.m. Faith Cole McLean, who was married to actor Douglas MacLean and had acted herself, was knitting on her porch when she was startled by a loud noise. Several neighbors heard it, but most thought it was just a car backfiring. When she glanced at Taylor's bungalow, Faith spotted a short, stocky figure who resembled what she imagined a movie burglar would look like. The individual wore a long coat, a scarf or turned-up collar, and a flat cap that obscured much of their face. Faith testified that the figure briefly met her gaze before calmly returning inside, as if they had forgotten something. Douglas MacLean described the stranger as peculiar-looking with an effeminate walk, and in a 1932 testimony, Faith admitted she wasn't sure if it was a man or a woman. The mysterious figure then vanished into the night, possibly entering the home while Taylor was distracted saying goodbye to Normandy. The following morning at 7:30, chaos erupted at the Alvarado court complex. Taylor's valet, Henry Peavy, was frantic, shouting, "Mr. Taylor is dead! Mr. Taylor is dead!" Peavy had found Taylor lying face down and lifeless on the floor of his study when he arrived for work. Instead of calling the police, Peavy informed the studio, which led to a gathering of Paramount representatives and curious neighbors. Eventually, someone thought to call the police, who arrived to find a growing crowd. Before the officers got there, Paramount employees hurried to clean the scene. They removed a basket full of letters and searched the bungalow for anything that could be incriminating, including bottles of illegal liquor. They also instructed Peavy to rearrange the furniture, clear away blood, and clean the crime scene. Despite their efforts, they missed a stash of letters that Taylor had hidden in his writing booth. As Taylor's body lay in a pool of blood, onlookers speculated about how he died. One neighbor thought he had suffered a stomach hemorrhage, but when the police finally arrived and turned the body over, the truth became clear. A single bullet had pierced his lung, traveled through his body, exited, causing his death. He had been shot in the back. The shock of Taylor's murder sent Paramount Pictures and the film industry into turmoil. Taylor was a respected figure known for his eloquence and clean reputation, with 60 films to his credit. Unlike many in Hollywood, he had managed to stay out of scandal, but his death occurred during a time of intense scrutiny for the industry. Hollywood was still recovering from the recent deaths of stars like Wallace Reed and Olive Thomas, and activists, including a group led by Reed's widow, were protesting what they deemed corrupt content and the immoral behavior of young stars. Hollywood had become seen as a major threat to American values, with calls for reform coming from both progressive and conservative factions to protect the youth. The same groups that had pushed for prohibition were now targeting Hollywood, looking to reform or even dismantle it. In response, Hollywood considered establishing a censorship office to appease critics and viewed Taylor as the ideal candidate for chief censor. They hoped that under his leadership, they could continue making films with minimal restrictions. However, Taylor's murder derailed those plans and sparked a series of scandals that eventually led to the restrictive Hollywood Production Code. What secrets emerged after his death? Mabel Normand's connection to the case raised questions, but it was a young actress, Mary Miles Minter, who became the focus of media attention following Taylor's death. At just 20 years old, Mary was already an accomplished performer. Born Juliette Riley in 1902 to actress Charlotte Shelby, she began her stage career at age 5. By 10, she was cast in a touring production, but child labor laws prevented her from continuing. Her mother then borrowed the identity of her deceased cousin, allowing Juliette to become Mary, now officially 12 years old. At 15, Mary reportedly had an affair with her much older director, James Kirkwood Sr., and was rumored to have become pregnant. Her mother, who tightly controlled Mary's career, allegedly arranged for an abortion and became increasingly protective afterward, though her protectiveness may have crossed into obsession. Mary worked with William Desmond Taylor between 1919 and 1920, collaborating on 4 films. Taylor became a champion for Mary's career, and she fell deeply in love with him, expressing her feelings in numerous love letters. After Taylor's murder, these letters were leaked to the press, many of which were published in full. Although there was no evidence that Taylor reciprocated her feelings or acted on them, the media speculated about a romantic relationship, suggesting it began when she was just 17 and Taylor was 47. While the letters that surfaced were relatively innocent, they clearly indicated a strong physical attraction from Mary's side. It is likely that Paramount destroyed any more suggestive material they found at the crime scene. Paramount saw an opportunity amidst the scandal, which only added to the buzz. A lace handkerchief with Mary's initials, M, was discovered in Taylor's home. There were also rumors of a pink nightgown featuring her initials, but it was never found. Mary even offered a $1,000 reward for anyone who could locate this elusive gown, yet it remained missing. It was later suggested that Paramount may have leaked Mary's letters to distract from more serious allegations surrounding Taylor. These included claims that he was seen visiting opium dens, which the studio downplayed by claiming it was for research purposes. There were theories that Taylor might have been fighting against Hollywood's drug culture, or that he was using drugs himself while advocating for reforms during Prohibition. Furthermore, there were rumors of him being spotted in gay bars, which seemed to be a scandal Paramount wanted to keep quiet. In a strange twist, Paramount then spread a rumor that Taylor owned a large collection of women's lingerie to portray him as a ladies' man. The studio seemed anxious about any implications of him being bisexual, whether true or not, and sought to eliminate any speculation. However, there may have been some validity to their concerns. By 1922, Taylor had formed a close bond with a young set designer named George Hopkins, who had collaborated with him on The Soul of Youth. At Taylor's funeral, Hopkins was seated near Mabel Normand, who was visibly emotional throughout. Several friends confirmed that Hopkins and Taylor were involved romantically. Since Hopkins was openly gay and worked behind the scenes, he faced little risk in acknowledging this relationship. Notably, he was the paramount employee dispatched to retrieve Taylor's letters on the day his body was discovered. Hopkins enjoyed a successful career in Hollywood as a set designer until the mid-1970s, winning 4 Oscars. His memories of Taylor were prominently featured in a book about his life, published in 1980. Meanwhile, Mary Miles Minter often sneaked out at night to visit Taylor's apartment, hoping to wake him up. However, all indications were that Taylor was not interested in her affections and found her obsession troubling. Ed C. King, a special investigator for the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, concluded that Taylor was trying to discourage her. Years later, King shared his findings in Detective Magazine, stating that Taylor confided in a friend about a young girl who was infatuated with him, explaining that he felt old enough to be her father. He described an incident where the young girl visited his apartment late at night, insisting on staying. But Taylor insisted she go home, prompting her to cry and threatened to make a scene if he persisted in sending her away. After Taylor's death, Mary created quite a stir. Kenneth Anger's Hollywood Babylon presents an outrageous story where she supposedly leaned over Taylor's coffin, claiming that his spirit whispered his love for her, although this is likely untrue. Mary did react dramatically upon hearing of his murder. She reportedly insisted that a doctor take her blood and infuse it into Taylor in an attempt to revive him. She only abandoned this idea when she was finally shown Taylor's body. At the same time, the media was abuzz with speculation about Mary Minter's possible involvement in Taylor's death. Police discovered 3 long blonde hairs on Taylor's jacket, which they matched to Mary's hair using strands from her studio hairbrush. Since Taylor had his jacket brushed daily, the presence of any hairs suggested recent physical contact. There were also conflicting reports about whether Taylor and Mary merely waved at each other or stopped to talk when their cars crossed paths on the day he died. If they had hugged, it could explain the hairs found on his jacket. Much of the circumstantial evidence continued to point toward Mary Minter. Charles Hyam, in Murder in Hollywood, Solving a Silent Screen Mystery, speculated that the backfire sound heard by Taylor's neighbor that night might have been from a visitor's car. Hyam suggested that this mysterious visitor was someone Taylor quickly dismissed to return to his tax work, possibly his own brother. According to this theory, Mary visited him again, professing her love and threatening to harm herself or him. Hyam proposed that Taylor hugged her to calm her down, which could have accidentally caused the gun to discharge. The position of Taylor's wound adds to the mystery. The bullet holes in his jacket and vest were misaligned, and powder burns indicated that the gun was fired at close range with his left arm raised, as if he was embracing someone. The shooter would have been slightly over 5 feet tall, matching the profiles of the female suspects, or someone who would have had to crouch to shoot from the right angle. In the following weeks, speculation ran rampant. Reporters spun a tale of a love triangle involving Taylor, Mary, and her mother, Charlotte. They questioned whether Charlotte had discovered that Taylor was involved with both her and her daughter. It was later revealed that Charlotte owned a .38 caliber pistol, the same type used to kill Taylor. Mary also had access to this gun, and a 1920 incident fueled the rumors when reporters uncovered that Mary had locked herself in her room with Charlotte's gun during a tantrum, fired a few shots, and then pretended to be dead as a cruel joke on her family. Hyam suggested that Mary might have tried to use the gun to manipulate Taylor, similar to how she had with her family. Investigators later found an unfired soft-nosed bullet hidden in the rafters of the Shelby family home, which matched the type and weight of the bullet taken from Taylor's body, according to Detective Lieutenant Sanderson, who testified to this in 1937. However, a significant flaw in the theory that Mary visited Taylor and shot him that night was that none of the neighbors reported hearing a gunshot during the night. Given the earlier disturbances, it seemed likely they would have been alert to any sudden loud noises. On the other hand, early estimates of Taylor's time of death based on the lack of rigor mortis when he was discovered, suggested he may have died between 1 and 2 a.m. This brings us to another key suspect in Taylor's murder, director King Vidor. He was a close friend and collaborator of Taylor, and he became heavily involved in the investigation, suspecting that Charlotte Shelby might be the culprit. The theory suggests that Shelby, disguised as a man, entered Taylor's bungalow, found Mary there, and shot Taylor in a fit of anger. Charlotte Shelby was an extremely possessive mother who lived through her daughter Mary after failing to achieve her own acting dreams. She invested all her ambitions into Mary, who started acting at a young age. For Shelby, Mary was not just a source of pride, she was a significant investment that would pay off if she succeeded in Hollywood. Upon discovering Mary's affair with James Kirkwood Jr., Shelby became furious. She financed an abortion and reportedly threatened Kirkwood with a .38 revolver during the filming of A Cumberland Romance. Shelby also allegedly barged into Mary's dressing room, gun in hand, catching her with actor Monty Blue. After Blue left quickly, Shelby took Mary home. Later, she is said to have stormed into Taylor's office shouting, "If I ever catch you hanging around Mary again, I'll blow your goddamn brains out." This was a clear warning. One night in 1920, Shelby reportedly showed up at Taylor's bungalow, supposedly with her 1912 .38 Smith & Wesson revolver hidden in her sleeve, demanding to know if Mary was there. Fortunately for Taylor, he informed her that Mary was not present. Remarkably, Shelby was not formally questioned in the Taylor case until 1937, following a civil dispute with her other daughter, Margaret Shelby. Margaret testified, "I protected her against the Taylor murder case," prompting a grand jury investigation. During this inquiry, Margaret claimed that Mary was not home the night of the murder and was concerned that Mary would elope with Taylor. Surprisingly, Charlotte herself called for the inquiry, hoping to clear her name after her daughter's allegations. This could indicate either a strong belief in her innocence or a risky gamble with hidden motives. Shelby's primary alibi for the night of the murder was actor Carl Stockdale, who allegedly received a monthly income for claiming he was with Shelby from 7:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Shelby's mother, Julia Miles, reportedly disposed of the revolver by throwing it into a bayou near their Louisiana plantation in August 1922. King Vidor later revealed that the revolver was recovered from the bayou in 1926. District Attorney Asa Keys questioned Mary Miles's mentor about whether she had ever heard Shelby threaten Taylor's life. Mary's response suggested her mother's volatile nature. "Not definitely. She may have said, 'I'll kill him. I'll kill him.' She was like that. She was always going to kill somebody." Regardless of whether Mary or her mother were directly involved in Taylor's death, the scandal ruined Mary Miles's mentor's career. She transitioned from child roles to young adult characters, and Hollywood had been positioning her as America's sweetheart, a new Mary Pickford. However, the media quickly shifted this portrayal, depicting her as a controversial, murderous figure. Mary acted in only 4 more films before her contract ended in 1923. After Paramount let her go, she received several offers to restart her career, as studios began to understand that any publicity could be good publicity. However, she turned down all the offers because acting was never her true passion. In 1957, she married Danish-American businessman Brandon O. Hildebrandt and spent the rest of her life away from Hollywood. She died in Santa Monica on August 4, 1984, still surrounded by suspicion regarding the murder of William Desmond Taylor. Mabel Normand, while never a main suspect, faced significant scrutiny for various reasons, which severely affected her career. Her behavior after Taylor's death, particularly her insistence on retrieving letters she had sent him, raised eyebrows. Although Mabel had something to conceal, it was unclear what it was. The investigation highlighted Mabel's tumultuous life. She was notorious for her late-night parties and heavy drinking, and her wild lifestyle had long been the subject of public attention. Rumors suggested a romantic relationship between her and Taylor, especially after her recent breakup with director Mack Sennett. However, if they were involved, Many dismissed the idea that Mabel had the same burdens regarding Taylor as Mary did. The theory of her involvement was more indirect. It was believed that a vengeful drug dealer might have targeted Taylor. Reports indicated that Taylor had gone beyond merely encouraging Mabel to seek help for her drug addiction. He allegedly chased away her suppliers, creating significant issues for them. Before Taylor intervened, Mabel's drug expenses reportedly reached $2,000 a month, equivalent to nearly $40,000 today, resulting in a serious financial loss for her dealers. Hollywood rumors suggested that Taylor intended to expose several dealers who supplied Mabel and was determined to protect her, albeit in a misguided and dangerous manner. At that time, Hollywood was rife with violence, with figures like Vito DiGiorgio of the La Mafia and politically connected gangster Albert Marco operating in the area. Taylor's actions would have placed him in grave danger, especially with Mabel being portrayed in the media as a reckless party girl with alleged connections to dangerous people and drug use. Her career never recovered after these events. Her health deteriorated, and she died in her 30s from tuberculosis. Reportedly, one of her final thoughts was, "I wonder who killed poor Taylor." Henry Peavy, who was hired as Taylor's cook and valet about 6 months before the murder, replaced a suspicious character named Edward Sands. Sands, originally Edward Snyder from Ohio, had a dubious background. He began as a teenage thief, became a sailor, and later served in the Coast Guard. By the time he arrived in Hollywood, Sands had already deserted his Coast Guard post in search of a more glamorous role as Taylor's cook and valet. He adopted a British Cockney accent and claimed to be a trained English valet. However, Sands had deserted from the Navy, re-enlisted under various names, and faced charges of fraud and embezzlement. He was dishonorably discharged in 1916 after a year of hard labor, then re-enlisted in 1917, only to steal and crash a car. After evading punishment, he enlisted again in 1919 and worked in the finance office, where he forged a check for nearly $500 and falsified his discharge papers. In 1921, while Taylor was away, Sands stole some of Taylor's belongings, including suits, a car, and his checkbook. He even pawned jewelry and indulged in Taylor's expensive gold-tipped cigarettes. It appeared he was colluding with Taylor's driver, claiming to know things about Taylor that would protect him from serious repercussions. When Taylor returned, he fired Sands and the driver. In retaliation, Sands sent Taylor a pawn ticket under Taylor's original name, William Cunningham Dean Tanner, along with a mocking note that read, "So sorry to inconvenience you even temporarily." Also, observe the lesson of the fourth sale of assets. A Merry Christmas and a happy and prosperous New Year. Alias Jimmy V was identified through handwriting analysis as being from Sands, who seemed to know Taylor's true identity and his secret history. There were even rumors that Sands might be Taylor's estranged brother, Dennis, although this theory lacks substantial evidence. Regardless, it appears that Sands was either a meticulous planner who played the long game or experienced a mental breakdown while working for Taylor. Julia Crawford Ivers, a friend of Taylor, later noted that Sands was exceptionally devoted to Taylor. During the first year and a half of his employment, Taylor entrusted Sands with everything. Sands was known to read extensively and study late into the night. After hearing about Sands's actions, Taylor and others concluded that Sands had likely become unstable in the weeks leading up to Taylor's murder. Taylor received a series of unsettling late-night phone calls from an anonymous caller who would hang up without speaking. The night before he was killed, he showed his tax preparer, Marjorie Berger, $5,000 in cash, which was missing after his death, while only $78 in a diamond ring remained on his body. On the day of Taylor's murder, Sands worked at a lumber yard in Oakland, California, but abruptly quit and disappeared. Despite Paramount offering a large reward for his capture to shift attention away from other scandals, Sands was never located. Interestingly, Taylor had not made much effort to find Sands after their falling out, and he was nearly broke at the time of his death, which was unusual given his high salary and relatively low spending habits by Hollywood standards. This led many to suspect that Sands was blackmailing Taylor. Years later, rumors emerged that Sands had committed suicide in Connecticut. It was alleged that District Attorney Thomas Lee Woolwine was aware of this, but kept it hidden to maintain media focus on other suspects in Hollywood. Woolwine supposedly continued searching for a man who was already dead. There were also claims that Shelby had connections to Woolwine, which might explain why Mary Miles Minter or her mother were never charged. Speculation arose that she may have paid Woolwine and his successors. District Attorneys Asa Keys, who was later convicted of bribery in another case, and Pos L. Burn Fitz, who faced bribery and perjury charges in 1934. In one instance, it was revealed that the Shelby family had approximately $750,000 that went undeclared to the IRS starting in 1922. Large amounts were allegedly converted into bonds and stocks without any documentation. During a 1931 legal dispute, Shelby's accountant, Les Henry, claimed that much of this money was used to pay for police and press protection. Although Henry was convicted of financial misconduct, he was not charged with theft. Additionally, Woolwine received campaign contributions from Paramount, which may explain his reluctance to investigate certain suspects. Several detectives working on the case reported facing obstacles whenever they got close to solving it. Director King Vidor recounted in 1968 that retired detective William Michael Cahill, who had been involved from the start, once told him, "We were making progress, but then we were ordered to back off." Henry Peavy, who was Taylor's valet, had some unusual habits, including wearing full golfing attire despite never having played golf. On the morning Taylor's body was discovered, Peavy had just been released from jail for social vagrancy and dissolute behavior, which could include offenses like public urination or more serious issues. After a thorough interrogation, the police cleared Peavy as a suspect. However, Floribel Muir, a reporter from the New York Daily News, became convinced of his guilt. To try to extract a confession, Muir decided to exploit what she thought was Peavy's fear of ghosts, a stereotype she drew from films of that era that suggested black people were particularly scared of ghosts. Muir enlisted two friends, Frank Carson and Al Weinshank, to help create a frightening scenario. They offered $10 to visit Taylor's grave at Hollywood Park Cemetery, where Weinshank had previously hidden behind a tombstone covered with a white sheet. When Peavy arrived, Weinshank jumped out and yelled, "I am the ghost of William Desmond Taylor. You murdered me, confess." However, Peavy laughed off the prank and cursed Muir and her friends. Unbeknownst to Muir, Taylor had a distinct British accent, which Weinshank, who spoke with a Chicago accent, failed to imitate. Weinshank would later gain notoriety as one of the mobsters killed in the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1931. Peavy eventually died in a San Francisco asylum due to dementia related to syphilis. The final suspect in this complex case was actress Margaret Gibson, who had briefly worked with Taylor at Photoplay Pictures. Her career initially showed promise, progressing from minor roles to leading parts, but in 1917, she was arrested for allegedly selling opium in a park. She avoided prosecution by claiming she was conducting research for a role, which she referred to as gathering local color. Although she escaped conviction, the scandal severely hindered her chances of becoming a major star. Gibson continued to act in smaller roles under various pseudonyms, with Patricia Palmer being her most recognized alias. In 1923, Gibson faced further troubles when she was implicated in a blackmail and extortion ring that reportedly defrauded wealthy businessmen out of millions. One incident involved George W. Lasher, who paid Gibson over $1,100 to cover up a supposed violation of the Mann Act, which pertains to the illegal transportation of minors for immoral purposes. She was also connected to two men arrested for extorting $10,000 from Ohio Bank. President John L. Bushnell. Although she avoided jail time, Gibson's career dwindled to occasional minor roles. In 1929, she left Hollywood for Singapore, where she married an oil executive. After her husband was killed in a Japanese bombing raid, Gibson returned to Los Angeles in the early 1940s. Once back in Los Angeles, Gibson lived a quiet life under the name Pat Lewis. She resided in a modest home with only her cat, Raja, for companionship. She kept to herself, allowing her garden to overgrow to shield her from onlookers, and rarely left her house, anxious about encountering anyone who might recognize her, which was unlikely by that time. On October 21, 1964, Margaret Gibson suffered a heart attack. Believing her end was near, and as a Catholic convert, she asked her neighbors to call a priest. When no priest was available, Gibson made her own deathbed confession, stating that she had once been a silent film actress, and that she had shot and killed a man named William Desmond Taylor. Her neighbors, unfamiliar with the name, did not understand the significance of her confession. Gibson's memory was likely triggered by an episode of Ralph Story's Los Angeles she watched at a neighbor's house shortly before her heart attack. This episode covered the Taylor murder, which distressed Gibson as it brought back memories of the long-forgotten incident. Her final confession might have been an attempt to reconcile with her past, but like many deathbed confessions, its truthfulness is questionable. Since then, people have speculated whether her past connections to a blackmail ring were related to the murder, especially since it appears that Taylor was being blackmailed by at least one individual. Alternatively, some believe she may have killed him in a crime of passion, given that they would have had many opportunities to encounter each other on the Paramount lot, where she worked in 1921 as Patricia Palmer. The investigation into Taylor's murder suffered from mishandled evidence and potential corruption. Important evidence was lost soon after the murder, and what remained disappeared over time. In 2007, some documents from the original police files were released, but no new evidence emerged. Many theories and books have tried to solve the case, yet no conclusive proof has ever implicated anyone. In the weeks after the murder, public sentiment against Hollywood grew intense. Editorials likened the city's morals to those of ancient Rome under emperors like Caligula and Nero Claudius, branding Hollywood as an American Sodom and Gomorrah and calling for its downfall. Some depicted Taylor as a dark, sophisticated villain who got what he deserved, while others demanded every possible effort to uncover the truth and expose what they perceived as a conspiracy surrounding his death. To this day, the murder of William Desmond Taylor remains an unsolved mystery in Hollywood history. What was meant to be a glamorous world of wealth, art, and beauty has been portrayed as a violent, corrupt, and frightening nightmare, according to the media. Hollywood was not only exploiting young starlets, but also sophisticated, educated, and talented middle-aged men like William Desmond Taylor. In essence, no one was safe from Hollywood's destructive influence,